Hi folks, with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this presentation. In this essay I'd like to talk about procreation, having children. Why have children? Why not? What's the issue with children going forward? Is the Armageddon apocalyptic scenarios of population decline realistic? Are we entering a new era where population mass is not necessary for wealth creation or a wealthy society or for any reason in particular? Are we entering an era where artificial intelligence, robotics, automation generally are going to mean that there's going to be maybe 1 in 10 people in the world population are going to be needed for some sort of productive or necessary employment? That employment will probably be just to control and manage like cattle the rest of the population. There'll be nanotechnology do all the production? Will there be just a small core of programmers and parameter setters, this sort of thing, and in fact very few people will be needed? Will 3D printing change things so that the whole idea of massed workforces where everybody works, produces, consumes, this sort of thing, is that the architecture of what has been social and economic life for centuries? Is that about to change? So let's have a bit of a dive into this and see where we go. Now, this idea that population increase is necessary and we should all procreate, the idea of people not wanting to procreate being seen as strange, if not somehow perverse, and on the other side, the idea that having children, procreating at all is a threat or a danger to the planet, and so on and so forth. So there are some pretty extreme arguments and positions that are out there. Do any of them reflect the current or indeed the coming reality, the impending reality that we have to deal with? Now, let's suppose that artificial intelligence is going to replace half to 3/4 of all jobs, even over the next 20 years, so that people just simply won't be needed. So if the people aren't needed as workers, then their income, other than universal basic income, where their income is going, what are they going to consume other than the World Economic Forum taking you'll own nothing and be happy, and you'll temporarily rent, or there'll be pool sharing of everything. So if you need, I don't know, something like a mixing machine in your kitchen, that mixing machine will be owned by the community and it'll be pooled, and Billy Bob will have it on Monday, Jimmy Jack on Tuesday, and Billie Jean on Wednesday, and so on. So everything will be shared around, so that nobody will own anything, and the state will own or anything, any tool or device that you use, the state will own it. And there may be it would be a tiny elite, 1 in every 500 or something that actually owns things, and the rest of the population will simply be pack animals that are moved around for whatever reason that the elites need them. Now that's a very real, I know it's hugely dystopian, of course, but that's a very real possibility. So if there's no jobs, what are people going to do? If artificial intelligence and robotics and are going to do all that work, 3D printing, type technology and nanotechnology is going to produce all the goods that may be needed, then you don't need workers to do it, or very few, a handful. We have to remember we're entering a new era. Some people are saying, well, this is artificial intelligence is just the same as going from the horse and carriage to the internal combustion automobile, just the same is the argument. Well, I don't agree, because you need the horse and carriage thing. Horses are very expensive to own, and carriages were quite expensive to buy because they're all hand built. So relative to incomes, automobiles were quite cheap, and over the term cheaper to own than a horse, and they didn't degrade or break down and become tired or worn out or injured in the same way that a horse would, where you couldn't repair it. So the motor vehicle was far more productive. It could do a lot more work. It didn't get tired. So there were a lot of differences there, but it needed a lot of workers to make it. Also, only one person could use the automobile at any one time. So the idea of going from the horse and carriage to the automobile was that millions of automobiles were needed. This is a little bit different now with AI, because one piece of software on a server somewhere can serve 1 million or 10 million or 100 million people. You don't need 100 million packages of that software, and they don't have to be made individually as an item, as a consumer item to be purchased. So the ratio of workers to users to creators is vastly different in AI than it is or was rather with more advanced and intricate levels of production. Similarly, goods that were just beyond the reach of pretty much everybody, or new technologies indeed, were now available for everybody, but each item had to be made, manufactured and purchased as an individual item. There's motor vehicles and consumer electronics and so on. This is all now different. So artificial intelligence and robotics are really a huge change. I just want to illustrate the point here. I used to work as a kid, just in the summer school holidays. I used to work in a warehouse, and there was no automation at all. It was all labour. It was all people, human energy and pairs of hands, and it was all no automation other than say the trucks that would deliver or pick up stuff. Everything was done by hand. Now that's within my lifetime, of course, so it's not like I'm 100 million years old, whatever. But I went to a warehouse recently where they'd installed a fully automated, there's some human interaction, but a fully automated stock picking and distribution system, artificial intelligence, robotics, software running everything, and it wasn't really that expensive to put in. It's not a huge warehouse, but it cost them something like $3 million to do it, which is in the overall scheme of things not a lot of money. But they were able to get rid of 20 plus workers. Now these are low paid workers, they're grunts, but nonetheless, there are 20 jobs that are got rid of. I don't know how easily those people would get re-employed, but they were laid off, and they confidently assert, we were doing some work for the parent company of those guys. They confidently assert that with the efficiency and the improved productivity, the labour saving, of course, that sort of thing, that they'll get a complete payback in, they think, less than 12 months. I think that's a little optimistic, but I would guarantee they'll get a payback within less than 2 years. And that indicates the nature of where we're heading here. Now, a similar warehouse not too far away actually from that one, I don't know, 10 years ago, they had a conveyor belt, so there's some automation, and there was a forklifts running around all over the place. But beyond that, they didn't have any. So the level of automation just over the last 10 years, and AI being a big part of that, is quite considerable. And you look at the people that they had employed in, not just physically, grabbing items and putting them on, conveyor belts or whatever, but the people in the office, the back office, the people doing, various other administration tasks and so on. There's hardly any. So you're looking at a large warehouse where you can go for a minute or two without seeing a single worker, because so much of it is now automated. Unlike 10 years ago, and certainly unlike say 40 plus years ago, where there were bodies peeling off in all directions. So we need to reconcile ourselves, I think, to the fact that workers will not be needed, and if you don't have workers, then why do you have consumers? If you don't need either, then why do you need a large population or anything other than minimal population? Now, I don't know what the happy medium of population is going to be, but already you've got I think huge surpluses of population all over the world. I mean, look at the third world countries where you have billions billions of people with nothing to do. And the globalists, frantically trying to shovel these people into the first world economies of the West. For why? Why? For what purpose? So the reality is that a large population isn't going to be needed. There isn't going to be jobs for them, and they won't have the means to engage in the sort of consumer economies that we've come to accept, certainly since the Industrial Revolution kicked off. So why do we need people at all? Why should people procreate? Now, we look at the various disincentives to procreate, such as the cost of living, the fact that the Western state is increasingly taking the view that they own the children and you have no say in it. So if your 12-year-old child decides to become transgender and you disagree with it, the state can put you in prison and take them away. And you look at the divorce courts, for goodness sakes, how they work. Again, it's the state that makes the decisions. So why would anybody want to have children? Especially, and for the younger people that are being plied with insane propaganda, such as climate change, the world's going to end tomorrow, and this sort of thing. Why would they want to have children? So I don't know if there's going to be a place or anything to do or any need for, or requirement for a large population in the future. I would suggest not, but based certainly on what I'm seeing in, again, AI, 3D printing, nanotechnology, and so on. Now, things can take unexpected turns, and we look at history and you look at the prognostications that various observers, some of them quite well informed, had. A classic example, a well-known example of this is Thomas Malthus, who looked in the late 1700s, early 1800s type era. This was during the time of the agricultural revolution in Britain, and he looked at the increase in populations and the increase in food production. And he looked at the two, and he did quite a correct, by the way, mathematical extrapolation of the future. And he said, well, populations are increasing, geometrically, like 2, 4, 16. So, whereas food production is increasing arithmetically, 1, 2, 3, 4. So he's looking at that and saying, well, food production won't keep up with population increase. Therefore, we're going to see mass starvation and he forecast quite an apocalyptic sort of outcome to all this. He was also, by the way, a preacher, which probably added to his sense of, the horsemen of the apocalypse and this sort of stuff. But his mathematics was correct. But what he didn't perceive was changes in technology that increased food production, bringing large numbers of huge areas of what were marshes and inaccessible land, bringing those under cultivation, improved transport and storage, and this, a whole range of things which dramatically altered the landscape in terms of food production and thus the ability to feed increasing populations. So when we come to this idea of where will the technology go, I don't see, certainly from my standpoint at the moment, I don't see there's going to be a need for people in the future. Other than, I don't know, maybe we all need other people just to annoy each other and so on. But I can't, there won't be a need for workers anywhere near the scale that we see today, and there won't be a need for, or the ability to consume because the consumer society that we understand today, this assumes a universal basic income, simply won't exist. And then again, items won't be sold, but they'll be pooled and shared and so on. You'll own nothing and be happy. So I see those as the real outcomes, in which case, again, populations won't be needed. Now, when we look at the populations around the world, there's a lot of hand-wringing about Western countries and others, China, for example, where population increase, or the population rather, is not increasing, and the rate of procreation is not keeping pace with the number of deaths from old age. So if the replacement rate, plus some, is sort of 2.1, 2.2 children per woman, then it's somewhere between 1.3 and 1.7 in the West, and this means, of course, population decline. But why is that a bad thing? Why is it a bad thing? I'm not arguing for or against it, by the way, but what is the argument it's a bad thing? Well, that's the end of civilization. Civilization collapses and da-da-da-da-da. There's not enough young people to pay taxes to support the old people and this sort of thing. But under the economic sort of landscape that AI and robotics sort of suggests or implies is going to happen, then you won't need a lot of taxpayers. You won't need a lot of workers. Other factors will come in as well, like you reach a certain age, euthanasia will be effectively forced upon you, things like that. So there's still a lot of pieces to fall into place. But in a also a Western world where the globalists are frantically and aggressively and brutally, in my view, dismantling democracy and taking away any expression of the will of the people, and thus the main jobs will be, as they are in any repressive ideological society, the primary jobs will be as ideological goons to impose, the thought police thing on the rest of the population, but also secret police, goon squads to go around and threaten and kill people that have wrong think. That'll be where. If you look at the number of people in the communist ideological societies that were employed as spies and political police, secret police, that sort of thing, it was an astonishing ratio of people who were employed in those jobs, in those roles, and vast resources are expended by the state in oppressing the ideological state. And we must understand the globalist project is ideological. It has no grounding in any reality. It has no consent. It has no legitimacy. So the only way it can impose its rule is through the secret police, thought police type brutality, which of course we're seeing today. So if you look at the ratio of people that are employed in those ideological societies, the ratio of people who are employed in oppressing their fellow citizens, then it's mind-boggling. You can barely conceive of it. Sometimes 2 or 3, 4%, this sort of thing. Astonishing numbers. And when you look at the ratio of say the one thing about Hitler's regime, which drives the lefties and the goon squads and the globalists insane, was that Hitler's regime had the consent of the people. This is something that is constantly ignored. Now, it didn't mean that by 1943 and 1944 brutal measures were being used by the regime. They were, but certainly in those first 7 to 8 years, the regime had the full consent of certainly the great majority of people. Now, it didn't work out so well if you were, Jews, gypsies, and lesbians, and homosexuals, and communists. That things didn't work out so well. We know that, but they were about 1%, 2%, if you really want to push it, of the population. So the number of secret police, Gestapo type folks that the Nazis needed to keep things in check was no more than just ordinary police. So that they didn't have or need or want a political police in those earlier years. Not later on in the war as things were going sour, but they just didn't need that. So what we're seeing with the globalists do not have any consent, and thus their ideology must be imposed. So I would see the big employment opportunities coming there. We see it now. The vanguard of those secret police are really the diversity officers and the human resource departments, the NGO activists, and so on. The activists in courts, the divorce courts. These are the vanguard of what will morph into the oppressor secret police in I think the not too very distant future. So just in summary here, I don't think a large population is going to be needed, and given the role of AI and robotics, that's more than replacing and making up for the reduction in levels of procreation, and given the authority or non-authority that the state is now allowing parents. I would seriously question how today. I'm not thinking of it now, but if I was sort of in my 20s or something today, I would seriously question having children, giving the power of the state and the inability to have an independent court of law to go to have my grievances redressed. Everywhere you look now, the courts are politicised, and so the idea that the rule of law and due legal process exist is in itself disappearing. So in such an environment, insane propagandists at school and everywhere, the media and so on, you can't protect your children. Very difficult to protect your children from that. And if you give them the solid values of yesteryear, are they themselves going to be outcasts and victimised for having such views when they go out into the wide world, when you're not there to look out for them? So a lot of things there to think about, and I'll be interested in looking at your comments below. You've been with Tassifs today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.